In psychology, projection is displacing your feelings onto someone else. And in politics, or colloquially, we sometimes call projection when you blame others for doing something which actually you are the one who is guilty of doing. And it's very hard to imagine any better example of that in the modern political landscape than Republicans obsessing about supposed Democratic voter fraud, voter impersonation, and other hijinks, when it is actually anecdotally they themselves that are doing it, even though overall it's extraordinarily rare. We now have another example of this as a Republican has pleaded guilty to voting in two different states. And again, the big picture story is that this type of thing is very rare, not very easy to do, and has never impacted any election to the degree that it would actually affect the results. At the micro level, when individual instances of voter fraud actually take place, it's almost exclusively Republicans who are actually doing it. Sometimes to, quote, test the system, they claim. Or listen, I killed him just to see if the police are that good at solving murders. Give me a break, okay? And sometimes it is because they are actually trying to do it. They just want to vote twice or whatever the case may be. In this article, we have learned of a New Hampshire Republican who voted in two states. A man who voted in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts in the 2016 general election has been ordered to pay nearly $5,000 in fines and penalties. Now, I think it's also important to mention that sometimes when people have accidentally voted illegally, they get prison time. There's a famous story of a black woman who wasn't even deliberately voting multiple times. She just wasn't supposed to vote, and she did. She went to jail. In this case, Todd Krisiak is having to pay a $5,000 fine. Was charged in June of 2019, pleaded guilty Friday to voting in more than one state. He was given a 90-day suspended sentence, a $4,000 fine, and a roughly $1,000 penalty. He cast ballots in Alton, New Hampshire, and Leominster, Massachusetts on Election Day of 2016. Krisiak was registered as a Republican in Alton. Attorney David Bedanza said his client voted in Alton where he lives. Later visited in Mother in Massachusetts. She said, hey, your name's on the list here where he previously lived. So he went there and voted as well. He went down to vote thinking that he could. Does anyone believe that? Is there any adult? You know, we had this story after the in November, there was the Virginia gubernatorial election where Glenn Youngkin won, defeated Terry McAuliffe. And we learned that Youngkin's 17-year-old kid went and tried to vote. I believe it was twice, but at least tried to vote once. And he was turned away because he's not 18 years old. And later, Glenn Youngkin chalked it up to he didn't know he couldn't vote. He thought, he might be able to vote. Is it believable that there's any 17-year-old in this country? I'm not talking about someone, from someone who's been kept out of school and has never watched TV but just like a normal upper middle class 17-year-old who goes to a good school that doesn't know you have to be 18 to vote. It's just not believable. This is even less believable. I thought I could vote in both places. I thought I could vote twice. What? That doesn't make any sense. Even weirder is that Bedanza called the plea a fair resolution, but said the case raised unanswered questions about whether Krisiak acted knowingly in regard to each element of the crime. He said his client didn't intend to vote in Massachusetts when he voted in New Hampshire. So that and understand just the bizarre nature of that. He said he thought he could vote twice. When he went to vote in New Hampshire, at that point, he wasn't thinking, I'll also vote in Massachusetts. So the New Hampshire vote wasn't fraudulent. It wasn't part of planning to vote twice. His mom gave him the idea by saying, I saw you're still registered in Massachusetts as well. And so then he said, well, I'll go and vote. Oh, so it's not as bad because when you went to New Hampshire, it wasn't part of it. Give me a break, guys. Now, I think it's very important to issue one other reminder here. We on the left who care about facts should distinguish from between when they lie versus when they tell the truth about something that's not actually a problem. So what do I mean by that? They would spread the lie after 2020. Tons of dead people voted. Okay, well, no, actually, dead people didn't vote. What they often mean by that is alive people go and they say, my name is such and such, and it's the name of a dead person, and they vote in that person's name. Number one, that hasn't happened. Number two, it's a really bad way to win an election because there's not so many of those people that you could actually, in a reasonable way, flip an election. There's just not enough hours in the day on election day. However, it sometimes happens that someone fills out and sends in an absentee ballot legally. They're alive. Then they die before election day. Okay. That is a clerical issue. They've not done anything against the law. They were alive when they sent in their absentee ballot. Here's another example. People voted twice. Well, when sometimes people actually vote twice, we find out it's a Republican. And we found it recently with some Trump supporters down in the villages in Florida. We found it with this guy. However, sometimes what they mean is, hey, we found someone who's registered in two places. That's not a crime. That's a clerical issue. As long as you only vote in one place, it's not a big deal. When I moved to New York from Massachusetts, there was a period of time where I was still registered in Massachusetts. And then I went and I signed up to vote in New York. No problem. I was registered twice for a period of time. I didn't vote in both places. I didn't do anything wrong. Tiffany Trump, Trump's daughter, exact same situation. So let's distinguish between things that they say are happening that aren't, and things that they say are happening that are happening, but aren't actually a problem. It's not illegal. It's not against the law. There's no crime. There's no wrongdoing. A lot of these are just clerical issues. This guy voted twice knowingly. He's paying a $5,000 fine.